to broadcast pre-recorded video live. Let's take a look at how to set up the Restream scheduler. First, head over to scheduler.restream.io and log into your Restream account, then allow access for Scheduler to be able to access your Restream account. Next, you'll want to click the Video tab from the top navbar. Once in the Videos tab, you can upload your pre-recorded event. Once processed, hover over the video to see a quick preview or to delete the video. Now, head back over to your Scheduler tab from the navbar. Choose Schedule Event and select the video that you want. Give the event a title. Once it's time for your event to go live, Restream Scheduler will automatically start your stream on Restream.io dashboard and broadcast it to all of your enabled channels. And that's it. Now you can share your stream with your whole audience even while you sleep. I've been Randy for Restream, and make sure to have yourself an awesome multicast.
Yay! Thank you, David Nailing. Hi, and welcome to Testify's first ever virtual show, Out the Window. Out the window. So thank you all for joining us on whatever streaming app you are joining us with. Here is the part in our live show where I would ask, how many of you have ever seen a Testify before? And then I would say, please cheer. None of that is going to happen right now because everything's going on. Yeah, I know. I mean, y'all can cheer if you want to, my storytellers and producers. No, you've seen it before, it's fine. Don't worry about it. But anyhow, strange circumstances, strange days, right? For those of you who've never seen a Testify before, we are a monthly storytelling show, normally in person, normally at the Spider House Ballroom. And each month we get 5 people to tell true stories from their own lives that are all variations on a theme. Tonight's theme, out the window. We'll talk about that more a little bit later. Here is where I would give my speech about turning off your cell phones, but please don't, especially if you're streaming from it. Please keep your cell phones and other devices on. Wow, everything is backwards, but let's enjoy it, right? So tonight's show is free. If you would like to contribute, normally our shows are $5. If you would like to contribute, you can Venmo us at Testify ATX. You can also, if you're interested in longer term support, you could go to our Patreon, patreon.com/Testify ATX. But you don't have to do any of that. And really, thank you for being here and thank you for joining us. We've got 5 amazing people who are here to tell you true stories from their own lives. Just a quick note, because we are on platforms, we definitely want, engagement, but our comments are moderated. We have some rules in our live show about, appropriate behavior, laughing, crying, everything like that is fine. Just please don't talk. You guys can totally talk at home. I mean, also don't though, because you'll miss things, but you can, well, don't, but you could whisper or chat if you needed to. But as far as what you put on any of the platforms, our comments are moderated. So please be cool. These are true stories from their own lives. That's a lot of courage. It takes a lot of courage. And that courage deserves to be rewarded with respect, right? So be cool, or we'll delete your comments and block you. But we don't want to do that. We've never done this before. Be cool. We'll be cool too. So anyhow, tonight's theme is out the window. And I think when I was personally kind of thinking about tonight's theme, there are a lot of interpretations for out the window. It can mean a lot of different things. I was taken back to the summer after my freshman year of college. I had gone with my family to Minnesota. My dad's brother lives there with his wife and their 2 daughters, and their younger daughter had graduated from high school. And so my whole family, my mom, my dad, and my 2 sisters and I went up there to go to the graduation and also to see a little bit of Minnesota. And not just a little bit of Minnesota. The plan was to spend a couple of days in St. Paul and then drive up to Canada and spend a little bit of time on Lake Superior. So all of this was wildly new for me. This is safely the most north that I'd ever gone, although some of you may know, I-35 stretches all the way up. I saw the end of I-35, which was pretty cool. Anyhow, we get up there and, it's fairly different. We're there in June and it definitely feels like a crisp Austin fall. And they're like, oh, it's unseasonably warm. So, there's a lot. It was comfortable in St. Paul and we spent a few lovely days there. But then, when we were getting ready to head up into Canada, my aunt was kind of looking at us, my family, and was like, I told you, I thought I told you to bring jackets. And we're wearing our hoodies and our windbreakers. And we're like, we brought our jackets. We're wearing them right now. And she's like, those aren't jackets. And she pulls out what we would call a coat from the closet and says, this is a jacket. And we're like, oh no, that's a coat. And then she's like, no, and pulls out something that we didn't even have a word for from the closet and was like, this is a coat. And we're like, we don't actually know what that is. Maybe it was a parka. And I thought maybe she was exaggerating a little bit, but then as we went further north up into Canada, it did begin to get colder, and we did pick up various cold weather accoutrements along the way. We stayed mostly in pretty rural areas. It was quite beautiful and very different from anything I'd ever really seen before. Very forested. Part of this is also because the main attraction that my mom wanted to see were, the living history fur trading post recreation sites. Those were our main attractions. My mom is a middle school teacher, and while you may be able to take a vacation from the place that you live, you can never take a vacation from learning. This mindset definitely actually accompanies every place I go with her. It could be the grocery store, and I will learn something from her. So anyhow, we stop off in these fur trading posts, living history. It's fun. There's an uncomfortable ratio of men to women favoring the men. My older cousin and I were both a little nervous, even there with our dads. But all in all, it was a really great time. But the real showstopper was once we got to the place that we were staying up off of Lake Superior. It was a lodge. Now we were there off season. This is clearly some sort of winter lodge, but it felt like winter to me. So, and the lodge was pretty cool. Again, most of the activities were clearly there for winter times, but we, weren't staying there too long. And the main goal was really just to walk around and look at the water. And my family and I were all sharing a room. Now, my dad's brother, they had their own room, but my family and I, when we traveled and stayed in a hotel or a motel, we stayed in one room together. Bless everybody who got to actually stay in different rooms than their parents. That was not us. Now, staying in a hotel was still something else because normally we only traveled places where we could stay with family. Or friends of the family, where there was no staying in a place where you had to pay money at all. Every now and then we'd get caught out on a road trip or something like that and have to stay at a Holiday Inn. Or there was the summer before this where we all were at Disney World and we shared one room. And it was, again, my parents, my sisters, and me. My dad snored very terribly, and my mom woke us up very early, and nobody slept that trip, and also nobody got along. But everybody lived, and here we were the next summer about to spend another night all in a room together. And there would always be 2 double beds, and the parents would be in one bed and 2 sisters would be in another bed. And then the very, very lucky sister would get to be in the 3rd bed. And it was a lot of closeness. And, we don't normally choose it, but I guess it was worth it to get to go someplace different. I don't remember a lot about the room that we were staying in itself. But what I do remember is that I walked into the bathroom. There's a little bathroom off to the side of our main room. And one of the walls was a window. It was just a whole window. And it was breathtaking. It looked out off onto Lake Superior. It had trees kind of around the sides. There were rocks. It looked like a postcard. But there were also no blinds or drapes or anything like that. And in retrospect, this was probably not a room for a family, but a room for a couple. But we were all staying there anyway. But at first I was like, wait, how do I bathe in here? There's no way to shut the window. What do I do? But then as I stared out onto Lake Superior, which again, grew up in Texas, right? I've never met a lake that I couldn't see the other side of. But this was like the ocean. it just kept going and going and going. And I just kept staring out that window at the beauty that was in front of me. And I am quite sure in my life I've gone to beautiful places before, but I'm not quite sure I'd ever noticed them, because it really felt like for the first time in my life, I was in just a breathtaking, majestic scene. And so shut the door. I took all of my clothes off and took a bath right then. It was not supposed to be bath time, but it just felt right. I was also not raised to get naked in front of an open window, but there was something just so beautiful and so overwhelming that it just seemed right. So I did it. And I think one of the things that made it feel so appropriate, even though this would normally be so inappropriate, was that, well, A, there was nobody out there. But B, there was this whole wide world in front of me, but I was still on the inside. There was still a partition between me and everything that was out there. And so it was in front of me, but I was still safe from it if I needed to be. Being 18 and being in college, I think that is also a larger metaphor for just that time in my life. But there was something about being able to be in it and then also a little separate from it that helped me be a little bit bolder. And I think it is one of the most, or at least one of the first times that I have ever felt just completely free. And I think that's a thing that can be said about open windows or through the window. It is freeing. Now, it can be a good freeing, a freeing of inhibitions, a freeing of expectations. It can be maybe not the most ideal freeing, like a freeing of plans, a freeing of reality, but it is freeing. And tonight, we have a set of stories and some wonderful storytellers here to share their experiences out the window. First up to our virtual stage, we have Mark Gifford. Mark teaches composition and rhetoric at the University of Texas at San Antonio, and he's also an active Austin storyteller and writer. We have been graced with him on our stage several times. Mark is here and starting us off with his story, That Ain't Nothing. Check this out.
All right, folks, hopefully everybody can see me okay. So let's get this started. When I think about the scenes of my life, sometimes I feel like they've been spliced together by different editors with wildly different storylines and character arcs in mind. The person talking to you now, this person, has been a professor of composition and rhetoric at UT San Antonio for 15 years. He served on academic committees, presented at conferences, and done all kinds of stuff that looks and sounds good on a CV. But the person I am now, the academic professional my students and colleagues will know, heck, the person my wife knows, would have seemed like a space alien to the person I was as a teenager. As some of you may know, I grew up in the middle of nowhere, Central Texas, on an 1,100-acre peanut and dairy farm. In my teenage years, well, it was like if the cast of Jackass grew up in Hazard County. And at 17, the biggest joys in my life were trying to con people into buying me cheap beer, racing around my parents' farm on a Suzuki quad racer, and sliding my pickup around the gravel roads of McLennan County with my friends. And my friends and I, we treated them gravel roads as if they were our own personal racetracks. So one stormy Friday night, I got a call from a friend who wanted to know if I wanted to go riding around on the back roads. His stepbrother had come into town and he wanted to show him a good time. So I said, hell yeah, and I agreed to meet up with them and some other folks. Now the roads that night was muddy as hell. It had been raining something terrible. The gravel was the consistency of slick cake batter, and the water was running over the roads in some places. Now, there were 3 pickups full of people that night, and we spent the beginning of the evening sliding around in the mud, running in and out of ditches, cutting donuts in the middle of the road. And as we neared the T intersection near the Golson Water Towers, my friend Jason, who was in the truck in front of me, slid around a 90-degree corner. Now, as I am wont to do when there's rock and roll on the radio and a group of people to impress, I decided to show off. I pointed at Jason's truck and told the people in the pickup with me, that ain't nothing. Check this out. And as soon as I started sliding around that corner, I knew I was in trouble. The ass end of my pickup slid out way too far on that mud, and I was staring at the ditch as we slid perpendicular to the road. By the time I got that pickup righted, we were headed into the big muddy ditch. I frantically tried to throw it in four-wheel drive and punch it to pull out of it, but that damn ditch was as muddy as a swamp of sadness in Fantasia, and my truck started sinking faster than Artax. When I opened the door to the pickup, it smashed directly into the ground. Both ends of the truck were sitting even with the mud in that ditch. Now, none of us had tow chains or pull straps with us. That'd have been too smart. And I knew I could get one of my friends to drive me home, and I could get a chain or a tractor or whatever. But at that time in my life, Mom and Dad were still paying for my pickup, so that was not an option. So there I was, stuck in the middle of a seriously muddy ditch, in the middle of nowhere, in a torrential downpour, on my knees, trying to dig an entire 3/4-ton pickup out of the ditch with my bare hands, as my friends pointed and laughed at me, as good friends always should. Then I heard someone yell, "Car!" And I looked up and I saw a set of headlights approaching. And as the car got closer, I could see who it was. Now, Claude King was an old retired military guy that was well known in our community because he'd drive around the gravel roads in his beat up old Chevrolet Corvair, drinking moonshine out of mason jars. He only drove about 15 miles an hour, so the only thing in danger from Claude was his liver. But everyone knew that the drunker Claude got, the goofier he got, and he drank about 90% of the time. So Claude pulled up and rolled down his window, and the inside of that car smelled like straight up rubbing alcohol. He said, "Y'all get stuck?" "No, Claude, I decided to park in the ditch so we could get out and dig in the fucking mud." "Yeah, I'm stuck." So he told me he thought he had something in the front truck of that Corvair that would pull me out. So he pumped the trunk, and I started rummaging around in there. But the only thing I could find were empty beer cans and a bunch of wadded up wire. I yelled at Claude, "You ain't even got a chain in here, man." And he yelled back, "I didn't say I had a chain. Grab them extension cords." Well, my friends flat out refused to even try to use those old cords. We knew they'd snap the moment they got taught. But Claude insisted it would work, and he said, "If your friends are too chicken, I'll pull you out with this car." I tried to explain to his drunk, silly ass that shitty Corvair didn't have a chance in hell of pulling a big pickup out of a ditch on a normal day, much less in mud and with old phone wire and extension cord. But he insisted, and hell, we didn't have nothing else to do, so I tied that raggedy shit to his bumper and the other end of my trailer hitch, and we watched and laughed as he wound that Corvair out and slid back and forth on that muddy road. The wire actually held, but the truck didn't move. We finally made Claude stop when it sounded like he might blow the motor on that Chevrolet Corvair, and just as he was pulling off, another set of headlights started coming. This truck, or this vehicle, was a jacked up Ford pickup with big mud tires on it, which I thought was a good sign. And the guy driving it was a guy named Brian Ballou, and he was riding around in the rain with his buddy drinking beer, as it appeared a lot of people were that night. And if rednecks were sports teams, the Ballou family would have been the '93 Chicago Bulls, and Brian would have been their Michael Jordan. Brian asked me if I wanted him to pull me out. Now, I wasn't about to smart off to Brian like I did Claude. I didn't want to get my ass whooped in the mud, so I just said, "Yeah, please, Brian." He told me he didn't have a tow chain with him, but if me and my friend Jason would ride with him and his friend, we could go get his tow chain that he'd left at his cousin's house. So there were 4 of us in that old Ford on a single bench seat. And Brian and his friend were arguing about anything and everything as they guzzled beer after beer after beer, with the windows rolled all the way down in the pouring rain. Now, Jason and I knew these guys, and we knew they were crazy as shithouse rats, so we didn't say nothing to them. But at one point, I tried to roll my window up, and Brian yelled at me, and he said, "Man, don't do that, it gets stuck in here." And then at another point, the cherry flew off the end of Brian's hand-rolled cigarette and landed in his friend's lap. Jason and I saw it, but the friend didn't. And all at once, he started screaming and punching himself in the crotch trying to put it out. Now, as we got closer to Brian's cousin's house, Brian cut the headlights on the pickup, which I thought was a little odd. Then he threw the truck into neutral and killed the motor. And we coasted silently into the driveway of a beat-up old trailer house with trash all in the yard. All the lights were off. Brian whispered to us, "I'll be back directly. Y'all keep the truck ready." And the 3 of us sat in the dark, staring at this trailer house as Brian snuck around back. We heard a loud crash, a light came on in the trailer house, and that drunk, bow-legged redneck came running, dragging a tow chain behind him, yelling, "Start the pickup!" He threw that tow chain in the back, jumped in, and punched it. We slid backwards out of that driveway and took off, headlights still off. Jason and I were absolutely terrified. Jason said, "Brian, what in the hell are you doing? I thought you said this was your tow chain." Brian just put another wad of dip in his mouth and said, "It's mine now, ain't it?" Once we got back, I hooked the tow chain up to both trucks of the frames of both pickups, and Brian started yanking at my truck, not pulling, yanking. He'd back all the way up to my bumper and punch it, and that truck would hit, and the back end would flip off the ground. I was terrified. I just knew that tow chain was going to bust and kill somebody, but it didn't. And Brian finally got me pulled out. I had $30 on me, and I tried to give it to Brian as thanks for pulling me out, and he only took $11. He said that was enough for some more beer, a can of Copenhagen, and store-bought cigarettes. Now, the postscript to this story is that in preparation for the show, I sent what I wrote to Jason to make sure I got everything right. This is 25 years ago, and I know memory's unreliable. So he looked it over, and he said everything looked all right, but he did say he didn't think I provided y'all with enough context for what a drunk, crazy redneck Brian was. And so he said to tell y'all 3 things. He said to tell y'all that later that night, I didn't know this part of the story, later that night, Jason was driving home by himself on those muddy roads, going slow because he didn't want to get in the ditch. And he said all at once, this truck passed him on those muddy roads, flat out, no headlights on. It was Brian. He's still riding around drinking, didn't have the headlights on. He also reminded me, and I did remember this, he also reminded me that Brian liked to drive around with his horse in the back of his pickup in case he found somewhere good to go riding. Not in a trailer, mind you. He had the horse standing in the bed of that jacked up pickup. No one knew how he'd get it up there, much less teach it how to balance in the back of the truck. And finally, Jason said one time he was driving home and he saw Brian's horse in the middle of a field by itself, just grazing. Jason thought it might have got out, so he went out to check on it, make sure the horse is all right. He said as he got closer, he could see that Brian was actually with the horse. He was just laid on the back of it, passed out drunk, as the horse roamed through the community eating grass and flowers. So I guess maybe if there's a moral to all of this nonsense, maybe it's this. Don't judge a book by its cover. People can be many things at the same time. People are multifaceted. And that stuffy professional that you have to deal with on a daily basis may have done some ignorant shit as a kid. Oh, and maybe carry toe straps with you if you're going to go riding around on back roads. That's probably a good moral too. Thank you.
Oh my God.
Thank you so much, Mark. Yay! You know, maybe it's to tell stories from your youth before. Maybe it was the shirt with the no sleeves, but I could actually believe that you did all of that. But it was really quite thrilling. And I am trying to picture a horse in the bed of a car, or I'm sorry, the bed of a truck. And I can't, and maybe that's good because I also feel like that would fill me with a lot of anxiety. But yay, Mark, thank you so much. Mark and his writing partner, Todd Wright, are the creators of the Like-Minded Lunatics YouTube channel, which is on the internet where you already are. And they post original audio dramas complete with original scores and sound effects, multimedia storytelling videos, reaction videos, and silly shorts. They dearly hope you'll subscribe to Like-Minded Lunatics channel because let's face it, watching silly internet content is what's keeping most of us sane at this point. And you're so close. So go right after the show to Like-Minded Lunatics channel if you would like and subscribe. So next up, we have Holly Lorca. Holly is a writer, storyteller, and retired stand-up comedian who moonlights as an ICU nurse. We're incredibly lucky to have Holly here tonight to tell her story. Thanks a lot, life.
Hello, hi. This is strange. 2 things before I begin. The first one is I don't have an outfit change. And also my story doesn't have nearly as much action in it as Mark's. So we're just gonna hobble along. Stay with me. Here we go. I don't have many blinds on the windows of my house because at heart, I'm a 14-year-old who doesn't really want to spend money on stupid things like window coverings. And also I've never been overtly concerned with privacy. If you want to look into my windows on a hot summer night, see me sitting around watching Home and Garden TV on my couch, chilling in my Santa skull and crossbones sleeping pants, have at it. Just don't get the Chihuahuas to barking, because those little guys bark a lot, which I should have considered before getting to Chihuahuas. I'm a writer, which means I spend a lot of time staring off into space, because that's where all the good ideas are in our outer space. My stare spot in particular is up and to the left. I don't know if you all have particular stare spots. So if I'm sitting at Starbucks writing and you happen to be perched up and to the left of me, you're going to catch all of my stares. Just know that I'm not being a creeper. I'm just writing. One day, about 10 years ago, I was in my office writing. And in my office, I have a window above my desk. And if I look out the window up and to the left, there is an electrical pole with lots of electrical lines. And I spend a lot of time looking at this pole and these lines, because that's how exciting writing can be. So one day I looked out my window up and to the left, and I saw that there was a red stuffed teddy bear up on the power lines. And my first thought was, what the fuck is that? And then once I figured out that it was a red stuffed teddy bear, I was like, well, that doesn't really make any sense. So let's set the scene. Now, yeah, I live in South Austin, and I would say that my neighborhood is a little on the extra weird side. People throw things in my yard, like rear view mirrors from cars, and also found underwear all the time. But a red stuffed teddy bear up on the power lines, well, this was a little extra weird. This was news. He was just sitting up there like, oh, hey, Holly, what's up? Nothing strange about this. I took a picture of him, but in 2010, it was with my flip phone, which has been dead since 2010 and a half. So I'm pretty sure that picture is gone forever. How the hell did a red stuffed teddy bear get up on my power lines in my backyard? You would have to cross through my yard to get there up to the line. So immediately I thought about weird electrician rituals, and I Googled that because I thought, are these guys messing with people and planting things on our power lines just to fuck with us, right? So I looked that up, but no, there was nothing on the internet about that. There's no alley to get to the back of my yard back there. It's all engulfed in bamboo. And no one would have been able to get through my yard up to this power line without me knowing about it, because I told you I have 2 barking machines that are happy to announce if even a beetle shows up uninvited into my yard. He hadn't been like tossed up there because he didn't have shoelaces. He was wedged really tightly up in there. So the answer was, I don't know. I spent a lot of time thinking about all the possibilities, none of which seemed reasonable, and I came up empty. Regardless of how unreasonable it was, that bear stayed up on those power lines for over a year. Through wind and rain, as squirrels and possums crawled up over him and the bamboo tickled its undercarriage, that bear stared at me through my naked window. And that was a tough year in my life, full of cold and lonely times. I'd been through a bad breakup that year that left me feeling like an asshole the majority of the time. My stand-up comedy career, which had been booming up to this point, suddenly tanked, and I started bombing night after night. I had to stop. Also, I had diarrhea in an Arby's bathroom while Adele screamed at me that we could have had it all. So not my best year, y'all. But there that bear was, watching me through my window. I was huddled around my hot cup of tea, crying and pining away for all sorts of silly things. And he was the best company. He never was mouthy or judgmental. I'm sure even though he wondered why I banged my head on my desk so much. Because I am a writer bear. Over time, he got less and less red, more of a pink. He got smaller and smaller, lost stuffing and lots of other things, I'm sure. But there he sat, and I came to get great comfort from that bear, knowing that he was up there. It was just a strange and unreasonable thing that happened in my life. Just another thing that I couldn't explain, but I felt like I didn't need to. Then one day, just as suddenly as he appeared, he was gone. I guess that's how it is for a fall from the power lines. There's nothing gradual about it. He was just gone. Goodbye, bear. It was great while it lasted. I didn't go looking for him. I told you there's a lot of bamboo back there and squirrels and possums, and let's not forget the snails that crunch when you walk on them. No, thank you. I let it go and I moved on to staring at the dead branch that was hanging in the chinaberry tree. Then some live branches fell back there. You know, the dead ones, I can't get them to fall if I promise them candy and puppies. But the live ones fall all the time. So this giant live one falls back there and I had to go back and cut it out. And so when I went to grab that branch, I found my bear, my little bear, or what was left of him, which at this point was just a head and like a little right arm. But there he was. And just like a little kid who had found his long lost bear after so long, I reached down to pick him up, except it happened more slowly because I'm middle-aged and my hands were less sticky. I've never seen his face before, but I guess I always assumed that he was smiling at me, because what kind of messed up world would we live in if a bear magically appeared on your power lines to look at you for a year through a window while he scowled at you? So I assumed he was smiling, and certainly he was. Once I got him up close, I noticed that he indeed was smiling at me, even though most of the material was rubbed off of his nose. He was cute and he was raggedy, but he was my bear. After that, I went to my porch and I nailed up a nail and I hung him securely up there because I never wanted to lose my little bear again, which is ridiculous, I know. But he fits in with all the other weird shit I have hanging on my back porch. And I like to sit back there even now and drink beer while the Christmas lights are on and we stare at each other. And I get to think and be happy that this strange thing happened. I still don't get it. That rough, cold year is long since over. I don't feel like much of an asshole anymore most of the time. And Adele hasn't screamed at me in an Arby's bathroom in quite some time. But I do still get lonely. But when I do, I can go back there and look at my bear and be reminded that I'm never alone, not even though the chihuahuas are gone, not even during the quarantine, not only when the only sound in my house is the echo of me banging my head upon my desk. Thanks.
Yay!
Oh,
Thank you so much, Holly. And that is an adorable bear. I'm glad that of all of the worlds that we live in right now, at least that bear was not scowling at you for a year. And I have to say, you know, I know you prefaced it by saying that there wasn't a lot of action in that story, but you took us on a journey. We went on a journey with you and that bear. So thank you so much. We're now going to have a brief interlude. It's not an intermission, but it is an interlude where David Nailing, DL Nailing, will play us a song. So please enjoy. Thank you so much. Yay. If I close my eyes and just listen to your music, Dave, it is almost like we are at the Spider House Ballroom. And it is very comforting. So thank you so much. One more quick note on Holly. Work has been published in several anthologies, and her stories can be heard on many podcasts, including Dan Savage's Hot Mic. Her memoir, The Captain of Some Ridiculous Ship, will be out in spring of 2020, which feels like now. And you'll definitely want to check that out. I know that I will personally be getting a copy. So now we have Jack Darling. Jack is an award-winning writer, magician, rascal, and romantic. Out to prove beautiful things come from trailer parks, y'all. Jack is here tonight to tell the story, Artist Date.
Okay, so back in 2007, when the economy was tanking, I had my trailer stolen for my business. I do concrete save for, it was about 20 grand worth of equipment. I was in a pretty crappy relationship that I couldn't seem to keep from sinking. And then I also had this issue where I basically could not seem, I landed this job that would have been like 100 houses in a development, and because the economy, no one was building. So it was a really frustrating time, and I had started the business so that I would do magic and write, and I was doing none of these things. And so one day I decided to go to a bookstore because I was sad and look up some stuff on creativity. And I was looking through the books, and this book, The Artist's Way, fell down on the ground. And I was like, I don't really want to read that book, but it's a sign because I'm desperate. So I bought the book, and it said that you needed to do this 12-week program. And I was like, oh my gosh, what have I got myself into? But I did like one thing in the book. I like that it talked about doing artist dates. So I thought, you know, you do it once a week, but I was like, I'm going to go on a 13-day artist retreat for myself, nerd out on magic, read, write, whatever. And I'm going to go to Wimberley, Texas. And I stay at this little place called the Bandits Hideaway on the river. And I told my parents I was doing this, and they said, take 2 days to cry, then get over it, say yes to everything, and have a lot of fun. So I did. I went there and I started crying for 2 days. And then the second day I was like, why am I crying so much? This is terrible. You know, it's beautiful here, but I couldn't seem to get any words written on the paper. And so I just kind of laid under the tree being a little crybaby until eventually I saw an image of a story and I began to chase it. And as I was chasing the story, I had like chills and it felt really good. I hadn't had like this creative like spark in a long time. And I wrote for hours, went to bed, woke up the next morning, was excited on the third day, no more tears. And I go to the coffee shop and I'm writing for a couple hours, and this madman comes in. He looks like a mad scientist, and he's like, who's Concrete Blonde? Who's Concrete Blonde? And I'm like, me. And he's like, hey, I'm having some problem with some staining. You got to come with me. You got to help me. So I don't really want to go, guys. He seems a little nuts, but I pack my stuff and I head out after him. And as I go to get in my truck, he's like, no, come with me. Come with me. Well, when I turn around, he has a van, and I'm just like, that looks like a rape van or stranger danger, but okay, I'll go. So I get in and we go on this journey into the woods, and I don't have any reception on my phone, but we end up at this place where I see that he has pretty much vomited black stain all over the place, and it looks horrible. And he's kind of looking like he's about to cry. And he's talking about how he has a newborn child and his wife's going to kill him if he doesn't get paid on this job. And the economy is killing him. And I just want him to shut up because it's too much. And so I tell him to get out so I can assess this damage and figure out how to help him. So I come up with a plan and I call him back in, and then we take a few hours and we make this look amazing. And it feels really good to think about someone else's problems and to be able to, fix their problems, because I was just feeling like a train wreck. And after, we get this done, I'm like, all right, now I'm going to go write. He's like, no, you're not. You're not going to write. You're going to follow me. You're going to go with me. We're going to go about an hour out to this restaurant. It's magical. You're going to love it. And the guy, you got to meet him. I just feel it. You got to meet him. And I'm like, I don't want to meet him. I don't want to go, but we're on the road to go there. And as we're going, all of a sudden he veers off to the left really quickly. And we're going up into this like hilly area, and there's just trees and no houses and no reception on my phone. And he's talking a mile a minute about picking up his buddy. And I think I'm going to die because it looks like a scary movie where we are. And then eventually I see a little trailer in the distance, and when we get there, he's like, go knock on the door. And I'm like, And I knock on the door, and this guy opens it, and he's in his whitey tighties, and he's missing a leg. And he's like, who are you? And I'm like, I'm with him. And then we get in the van and we head to what is going to be a bait and tackle shop. That's also a restaurant. And when we get there, it looks like a bait and tackle shop. But when we go through the back doors, it's this awesome restaurant that is like, looks like, well, and again, vomit all over the ceilings and the walls. Like, it's just like a little Elvis Presley figurine and like ships and all sorts of crazy stuff. And you're just like, whoa, what is going on? And then we sit at the bar, which I get nervous about because the guy who lost his leg has just told me this story about how he was a drunk and he stopped drinking for a year because he crashed his motorcycle and lost his leg, and he's miserable, but he's trying to be happy and find joy. And now we're sitting at the bar, but then he orders a little mocktail, so we get a drink, and we meet the bartender who's also the owner. And he's like so cute and little, and I just want to hug him right away. And we all start talking and eating really good food, and I perform some magic tricks for them, and then people start coming over to us, and we're entertaining a bunch of people, and it's really fun. And then that dies down, and the owner of the bar wants to talk to me, and so he's like, hey, I want to talk to you for a second. I just want to tell you, while I was watching you perform, I felt such joy and happiness coming from you. It like really lit me up. And I was like, oh, thank you. And he said, but you also seem really sad. And I was like, well, I'm going through a transition. I'm trying to escape my life right now. And he was like, yeah, whenever I was younger, I was trying to escape my life. And as I crossed the border to get here, I was starving and I wasn't doing very well, but I was just thinking that when I got here, there was a promise of a lot of good things happening for me. And I'm fishing out of the river with this makeshift fishing pole that I made. And after several hours, I finally catch a fish. And just as I do that, a cop drives up and tells me that I have to throw the fish back into the water because it's illegal to fish on the river. And he was like, I went to bed that night. My stomach was so empty and I felt so angry. And I kept thinking to myself over and over again, who owns a river? Where am I? What land am I on? Who owns a river? And he said, I was just so bitter. And I just knew that I couldn't fall asleep that night unless I started to think about why I come here. I came here for a better life. And so I started to think about what I wanted. And what I wanted was a bait and tackle shop where any age could show up and they could, come here and get their stuff that they needed and go out and fish their day away. And that I would have a restaurant so I would never go hungry again. And people would come with empty bellies, but they would leave with a full belly and a smile on their face because I created such a magical space for them to come to. And I just wanted to tell you that when I was watching you, I could see the magic. I could see what was going on with you. And I just want you to know that you're on the right path. I'm just some guy in a bar, but I just wanted to tell you that. And you look like you need a hug. And I was like, I do need a hug. And so we hug, and then the three of us walk out of that restaurant into the night and get in the van. And I'm just thinking about the weird transition that the three of us are all going through in our lives, and that damn book. I mean, I didn't want to read it, and it kept talking about synchronicity and all the moments of resistance, and it was true. And here I was happy, and I just didn't imagine that this would be how my day would go. And of course, the mad scientist turns around and says, I know you, I told you you needed to meet him. I told you. And he was right. He was right, because I needed to hear the message about just remembering not to just to focus more on the things I want and not on all the things burning down around me. And that message meant everything in that moment. And that damn book led me there. And I had to admit that in that night, driving into the darkness back home by the headlights. Thank you.
Yay!
Any minute now. Some days.
Thank you so much, Jack. I think that was a message that is useful for many people right now. I know I certainly could use the reminder not to focus on what's burning down. I also have to commend you on reading The Artist's Way. because I have had that book unopened on my shelf for at least a decade. And I think that you're I know so many people who have it and haven't ever actually like read it or done it. So congratulations on doing that. I guess maybe I should think about it. It sounds like it brought you to a really magical place. So yeah, thank you so much. Jack recently did a 2-part series for Strangers podcast, has also performed at Bedpost Confessions, Velveeta Room, Cap City Comedy, and perhaps even in your living room. And actually, no, definitely in your living room if you are watching this right now. So tonight we closed with Erin Halligan-Clare. Erin is the founder and artistic director of Story Bar, a multidisciplinary arts initiative featuring storytelling and the exploration of the human condition. And she's recently launched her creativity coaching practice, Inward and Artward, which I think is very beautiful. Tonight, Erin shares with us her story, Second Chances.
Thank you, Kate. When I was born, my grandma Ruth moved from Michigan to Washington, D.C. to live with us and help out a little bit. When my parents worked, she would host these elaborate tea parties for me. We'd build forts in the living room. We'd watch our stories, which ranged from Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood to Reading Rainbow. She was my childhood best friend. So when it came time to go to school, I was so excited to work on the big family tree project and to learn all about my ancestors. My grandmother had been born in 1909 and had been through the 1918 flu, the Great Depression, women gaining the right to vote, 2 world wars, and perhaps most impressive of all, my hours-long interpretive theater performances. So when I found out that Grandma Ruth wasn't my biological grandmother, I was gutted. My biological grandmother, Mary Lou, as it turns out, was still alive, living on welfare in Section 8 housing in rural Michigan. My mom was an unexpected pregnancy. Mary Lou was too young, and in 1954, she gave her baby up for adoption to Ruth and Jay Maley, an older couple who had been trying for 25 years to have one of their own. Later in life, coincidentally, Mary Lou had herself adopted a young boy named Tony, the son of a couple from across the street, both of them addicts. She used to walk over there and take the baby back to her house on a regular basis, and eventually he just stayed with her. My dad helped her make it legal. And I remember having difficulty understanding how someone 5 years my junior could be considered my uncle. Grandma Ruth, or rather my real grandmother, as I like to refer to her, died in 1995. She was old, suffering from Alzheimer's, and had forgotten all of the incredible stories from her own life, including losing half her siblings during the Depression, or watching her husband go off to war, or becoming a 2nd grade teacher at the school where my parents first met as children. Very quickly, she forgot my own mother and her own name, and I'll never forget the day where I realized that she forgot me too. My parents decided to have her memorial in Michigan, and the trip suddenly starts to include plans to visit Mary Lou. Everyone seems on board with this except for me. My mother, feeling guilty for not engaging maybe more in the relationship. My father, ever the unwavering Christian, eager to help folks in need. My brother, excited to have an uncle his own age to play with on vacation. And my sister, the quirky empath who genuinely seemed grateful to have a grandma, any grandma, alive and aching to love her. My own reaction is one of anger. I hate the sense that this feels like Grandma Ruth is being replaced, that Mary Lou is trying to fill this unfillable void, trying to make up for lost time that I don't think she's entitled to. I hate that her stories were ones of floozy decisions and inescapable poverty opposed to epic tales of great world events and adventure. We arrive at her apartment just hours after the memorial service. It's hot. There are box fans on high in every doorway. Tony is loud and sweaty, and the backyard is littered with abandoned plastic toys and cigarette butts and empty soda pop cans. Mary Lou cries when we arrive. She asks, "So how are you?" on repeat, and bawls when we leave, unable to break free of a very long embrace with my mother. Meanwhile, I'm the first one to the car, certain that I'm the one that's the victim. And it's like this for years, these visits. Once when I was in high school, she even came out to stay with us in DC. And I remember noticing for the first time that her red hair was frizzy like mine, and that my mom had her same sharp eyes. In college, I stayed in Philly during the summers, escaping from the family trips up north. And meanwhile, she and my sister grew quite close. She would share her own stories with Taylor, like how almost another couple adopted my mother, or how she and my mom's biological father had an affair, a brief affair years later when they reconnected. And Taylor shared with Mary Lou stories about us as kids, and how she's always been able to see spirits, to talk with them even. And though this well-known part about my sister Taylor has often been met with some reservation, Mary Lou believed her and accepted her wholeheartedly. Shortly after graduating college, I got a call that my uncle Tony had hung himself. He had been in a pretty toxic relationship, and his girlfriend wouldn't even share the funeral details with Mary Lou. My mom, my sister, and my brother made the trek back up to Michigan to hold their own service in memory of him. Mary Lou entered a pretty severe depression that lasted for years after that. And I called a couple times here and there, but continued to skip the summer visits. The last time I actually saw her was that time in high school, her wild hair and watery eyes forever ingrained in my memory. And in the spring of 2018, I get a call from my mom that Mary Lou had died, a stroke.
Oh.
I'm quiet. A lifetime of angst and selfishness bubble up to the surface. And in the span of a phone call, I see just how awful I had been, how much of an opportunity I missed in getting to know her, getting to know where I come from. I realized I had come from someone who had made the hard decision to have a baby she couldn't keep. Somebody who gave that baby to a family who could give it more than she ever could. Someone who provided love and stability to a little boy who was unsafe. Someone who genuinely lived a life of selflessness and resilience in the face of hardship after hardship. My whole life, I thought I owed her nothing. But the truth was, I owed her everything. My mom asked if I'm okay. Through a whisper, I managed to say, I blew it. I was the worst granddaughter. Later that afternoon, my sister Taylor calls. She says she has a message for me from Mary Lou, and she's not really sure what it means, but that Mary Lou needed me to know that that wasn't the way that she remembered it, and that she loved me. And I reach out to my mom immediately to see what she told Taylor about our conversation, but she doesn't pick up. I leave a message to call me back right away. And the next morning she calls on her way driving into work and says, I know what this is about. Taylor told me what she told you yesterday, but I hadn't said a word about what we talked about. Somehow I didn't inherit the full unconditional trust that both Taylor and Mary Lou possessed, and these messages from beyond that my sister receives take me by surprise. Maybe it was the fact that this was the first message for me, or maybe I just couldn't accept a message full of such undeserved compassion. But I couldn't shake the weight of it. And on the phone with my mom, I say, this really makes you appreciate the fleetingness of life and not take things for granted. It's just all so fleeting. And then, as if on cue, I hear a loud crash and glass shatter and a high-pitched shriek that makes my hair stand on edge. And then silence. I start screaming for my mom, wanting to plow through the phone, and once again, a lifetime seems to fill the span of just a few seconds. She finally gets back on the line. A tree had fallen and crashed through her windshield, narrowly missing the driver's seat. Her car was completely totaled, and she didn't have more than a scratch. And I still can't help but wonder if Mary Lou spared her life for a second time that day. A few weeks later, I find out I'm pregnant with my son, Mary Lou's first great-grandchild. And even though she wouldn't get to meet him, somehow the timing felt right. You see, it dawned on me that parenting is all about second chances, about making the lives better for your own children than it was for you, about living your own hard-earned lessons so that hopefully they wouldn't have to. It's about standing proudly on your foundation of roots and finding ways to continue to grow. But even more so, the timing felt right because at long last, I couldn't wait to share with my son the incredible stories about where we come from. Thank you.
Oh.
Thank you so much, Erin. That was an amazing story. Thank you for sharing with us some of the stories of where you come from. I cried real human tears several times, and I'm really glad that I was muted because when we got to the tree falling, I definitely gasped really loudly. So thank you. Thank you for sharing that, and thank you for taking us to those places with you. You sound like you come from some incredible grandmothers. Thank you. So, at the request of her soul, Erin is a writer and a storyteller, to our benefit, and she regularly teaches creativity and storytelling-based workshops around town. Her most important role to date, however, is that of a mother. One more round of applause for Erin. Actually, for all of our storytellers, if I could have you all turn on your videos.
Yay!
Yay!
I'm in my underwear.
Better. Is it freeing? This is out the window, man. Clothes go out the window sometimes.
Okay, there we go.
So much for being a part of this. And this is our first time doing a virtual show. So thank you, storytellers, for trying this out with us, being guinea pigs with us, and still bringing your A game because y'all were amazing. And also thank you to our audience for tuning in and also coming on this ride with us. We really appreciate everybody. Y'all did such an amazing job. Thank you so much. For our viewers, we will have another show in 2 weeks. I think that's the 28th. It is the 28th. I don't just think it, I know it. It's the 28th.
It is the 28th, yes.
Yep. The theme is going to be This Is Fine. We're also having a workshop this Saturday. It's going to be a virtual Zoom workshop, and it's all about telling a 5-minute story. So if you are figuring out what to do with your quarantine time, if you are interested in telling a 5-minute story adapted to a virtual telling, then please join us for that this Saturday. It is going to be $15, and it is available through our website, Testify ATX, and also you can find links to register across our social media. As far as tonight's show goes, thank you to everybody who has donated. We really appreciate it. If you missed it the first time, the busking the first time, we are on Venmo at Testify ATX. We also have a Patreon, patreon.com/testifyatx. We cannot thank y'all enough for listening. Storytellers, we cannot thank you enough for telling stories. You guys did so wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank y'all. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
I'm gonna flip that.